All right, so we're now live. We're live streaming on Facebook, and Zoom is now available to all participants and attendees. So yeah, we'll be starting promptly at 9. Sorry, 10.
Senator's not here then?
Oh, just logged in.
Hello, Daryl. Welcome.
I am not Daryl. I don't know why it says Daryl Swinney.
Oh,
Is this Senator Bradford?
I'm sorry?
Yes, sir. Okay. Let's try to change your name. Senator Stephen.
Hi, Senator Bradford. My name is Jennifer Trotter, and I'll be the moderator today.
How you doing?
Good, and you?
I'm here.
Good morning, Senator Kelly Irvin. How are you? Glad you can join us.
I'm mad at you, Kelly Irvin.
Please don't.
Why?
Don't be.
Why? You call me, I call you back, and I don't hear back from you.
Well, you know what? Mr. Sweeney took care of it all for us.
Then don't call me then. How you doing?
I'm well, sir. Thank you so much.
How's your mom?
Everyone's doing quite well.
Good.
Everyone, the senator he will always be my boss. So.
Stop. No, I work for you.
So
I
blame
work for you.
me on him, okay? Blame him on me.
Uh-huh. Blame you on me.
Yeah, that's right.
All right. It's 10 o'clock. Would you like to start the presentation?
all right, the presentation is already ready.
Thank you. Good morning and happy Monday. Thank you for joining the Regional Hispanic Chamber of Commerce Prop 16 Forum, a voter education event. My name is Jennifer Trotter, and I'm one of the members of the Regional Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, as well as the Business Diversity Manager for Burns & McDonnell Engineering. Prop 16 seeks to repeal Prop 209 from 1996 and amend the California Constitution to permit state and local government decision-making policies to consider race, sex, color, ethnicity, or national origin to address diversity in public education, public employment, and public contracting. The mission of the Regional Hispanic Chamber of Commerce is to advocate, promote, and facilitate the success of businesses in the Southern California region. That is why understanding the implications of Prop 16 is so important for the Chamber as well as its member organizations. We will have an opportunity to hear from both the yes and the no positions on Prop 16. So Thank you, Senator Bradford, for participating and representing the yes on Prop 16 position, as well as Board Member Ochoa for joining us today representing the no on Prop 16 position. After the proponents and opponents of Prop 16 share their positions, we will hold a panel to discuss in further detail the potential or anticipated impacts of Prop 16. Our first speaker today will be Senator Bradford. He has 20 years of public service experience, including as council member of City of Gardena, where he first started his career in public service, following by state assembly member and now state senator. During his time in public office, he has fought for job creation, economic development, and racial equity. Please help me in virtually welcoming Senator Bradford, co-author of ACA 5 that put Prop 16 on the ballot, to provide an argument in favor of Prop 16. Senator Bradford, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jennifer. And I just want to correct one thing. I got my political start as working for Kelly Irving when I was Congressman Juanita Miller and McDonald's district director. So that was my true introduction to politics at its best form. But thank you, Jennifer, for the introduction, and thank the Regional Hispanic Chamber of Commerce for this important discussion this morning. I'm somewhat miffed that there's anyone who would be adamantly opposed to Proposition 16. Proposition 16 is a common sense measure that provides equity, equality, racial balance to who we are as a state, and it should be embraced as who we are as a nation. To say that we should exclude race and gender and employment and education opportunities flies in the face of this Constitution, a Constitution that was formed over 240 years ago that used race and gender as the foundation of this nation. Denying women the right to vote, listing African Americans as 3/5 of a citizen, exploiting the red and brown man. This is what this nation was founded on. So this is a way to right what has been so wrong in this country for so long. And to correct the egregious acts of Proposition 209, we've seen the quantitative and qualitative data of the last 24 years. African Americans, Latinos, women are in no better position. Matter of fact, they're in worse position today than they were 24 years ago when it comes to contracting opportunities, employment opportunities, educational opportunities. We've also seen in the last 7 months since this pandemic who has been impacted the most. And it's been our frontline workers who, again, are primarily African American, Latino, and women. And when it came to PPP resources and revenue, we saw, again, who was excluded from that, and all kind of business loans. Again, minority-owned businesses, women-owned businesses. It took almost 3 rounds of monies to be distributed before African Americans and Latinos received any of this money. And the data shows that 60% of all small businesses that have been impacted by this pandemic will never open again. And again, most of those are owned by people of color. We've also seen the health disparities because of this pandemic. Again, African American and Latinos are infected at a higher rate and they're dying at a higher rate. There are fewer medical resources in their communities. We've seen the impact of education, the lack of the internet, and the failure of distant learning, again, impacting.
Senator Bradford, I believe we've lost you. It appears that your video has...
The Pence country, and this is in a state as it related to race. And again, Prop 209 that was passed 24 years ago has only further to exacerbate those problems. You have far fewer minorities that are now going to college, let alone graduating from college. And let me counter the argument that some of our Asian brothers and sisters are saying that if we look at race, it's going to impact them. Well, their numbers haven't grown in the UC and CSU system in the last 24 years. Where their numbers have grown are at Harvard, Yale, University of Texas, and other universities, Michigan, who have race as a qualification, as a consideration for admissions. That's where their numbers have grown, not here in California. This should not be a zero-sum game when we talk about inclusion. And that's what we should all be about, fighting to make sure everyone has an opportunity at the American dream. And we have spent the majority of the last 24 years cobbling around this thing called equity and inequality and affirmative action. I've lost track of the number of pieces of legislation that I've introduced that encourages contracting with women-owned, minority-owned businesses. We wouldn't have to do that if this was a fair and balanced system. Just last week, the governor signed my colleague, Assemblyman Chris Holden's bill as it relates to corporate board diversity. Again, why would we need legislation to say you need diversity on your corporate boards if race wasn't a factor? With over 600 corporations in California, the California-based corporations in California, the majority have no minorities at all on those boards. And that's why the governor was eager to sign that legislation to help, again, balance this great injustice. I authored legislation even in the cannabis space. We passed Proposition 64 3 years ago. Technically 4 years ago. It went into effect in 2017. Within a year of a new industry being grown, 80% of the owner operators in the cannabis space were white men. How does that happen if we're not looking at race as a qualifying factor or a disqualifying factor? That's why I had to introduce SB 1294 that Jerry Brown signed and now Gavin Newsom supports, to provide social equity in this space. Because again, we quickly saw the majority of people who are getting licensed in this business were, again, white males. Race is a factor in everything that we do. And to sit here and deny that it hasn't been, we're not true to ourselves. This, all it does is create equal playing field. It does not establish quotas in any kind of way. We still want the most qualified person to be hired. We still want the most qualified person to go to get into college. But at the same time, we need to look at, again, the lack of diversity in everything that we do. That's why I'm a strong proponent of Prop 16. That's why I was a co-author of ACA 5. And that's why I'm a strong yes on Proposition 16.
Thank you, Senator Bradford, for that introduction to Prop 16 and that passionate display of the importance of Prop 16 from your perspective. Now, I'd also like to invite Board Member Ochoa to the stage. Rosalisi Ochoa Bogue, I believe is how you pronounce it. Bogue, thank you.
Yes.
Is a native Californian. She has 16 years success as a realtor and received the Women of Distinction Award recently. She's devoted herself to helping others achieve the American dream and is a graduate from UC Santa Barbara. And from there went on to teach English language learners. Today, she serves on the Yucaipa-Calimesa Joint Unified School Board. Everyone, please virtually welcome Board Member of Yucaipa-Calimesa School District, Rosalisi Ochoa, to present the argument against Prop 16. And I will note there's 6 minutes for yourself to make the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. My name, as stated, is Rosalisi Ochoa Bogue. I'm an entrepreneur, school board member, and a state Senate candidate. I'm here today to speak on behalf of Californians for Equal Rights, No. 16, the principal ballot measure committee in opposition to Prop 16. Thank you for introducing me, and thank you for inviting me to this energetic forum. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to our audience on such a vital issue to our state and our Latin community. No on 16 committee is led by former UC Regent, Mr. Ward Connolly, who also chaired the California Civil Rights Initiative that facilitated the passage of Prop 209, which Prop 16 seeks to repeal. Prop 16 is unjust, unnecessary, and plainly wrong. Let me elaborate on that just a bit. Prop 16 removes these words from our state constitution, and I quote, "The state shall not discriminate against or grant preferential treatment to any individual or group on the basis of race, sex, color, ethnicity, or national origin in the operation of public employment, public education, or public contracting," end quote. Passed by popular vote in 1996, Prop 209 has set a progressive precedent of anti-discrimination laws in 9 US states and that mirror the true spirit of landmark Civil Rights Act of 1964. It stops racism, makes it so that the government picks the most qualified contractors, students, and employees based on merit, not race, sex, ethnicity, or national origin. In reality, since 1996, California has made strides in diversity and inclusion in public education, employment, and contracting. Underrepresented minorities have experienced significant gains in enrollment and graduation at both UC and CSUs. Minority admissions at UC exceeded those of 1996, both in absolute numbers and as a percentage of all admits. 90% in 1996 to 37% in 2019. In July of 2020, the UC system announced a historic first for admitting Latino students as the largest freshman group, as quoted by the UCLA newspaper. Four-year graduation rates of underrepresented racial minorities rose from 31.3% during the 1995-97 period to 55.1% in 2014. The CSU system has a student body that is 40% Hispanic. Latino admissions at UC increased 432% since 1996. Let me repeat that one more time. Latino admissions at UC increased 432% since 1996. Both women and men of color saw largest gains in employment rates proportional to their working age population growth. Minority civil servants increased from 38%, 70,000 in 1990 to 50%, 110,000 in 2007. Women in California today make up the majority of the law profession and the majority of college degrees earners. While our state embraces the nation's strongest equal pay law, in contracting, according to a peer-reviewed study by a UC Santa Cruz economist, the California Department of Transportation saved approximately $64 million between 1998 and 1999 from extra costs associated with preference. That's about $1 billion in 2020 dollars. We are already there. Let's celebrate our truly diverse and dynamic California and recognize extra government measures on race and sex preference are unnecessary and will incur great harms in California's tax base, economy, productivity, and competitiveness. Prop 16 will stoke racism and tensions among racial minorities because it only offers a band-aid solution to a systemic problem in our K-12 education. The problem of racial achievement gap must be addressed sufficiently at the community and family levels. We must promote excellency in learning and education. For example, 57% of socioeconomic disadvantaged Asian American students are reading at proficient levels, compared with 31% for disadvantaged Hispanic students and 12% for disadvantaged Black students. Prop 16 does nothing to solve root causes behind the persistent achievement gap. Instead, the scapegoats, it scapegoats hardworking students with the inflammatory and false label of overrepresentation. Those from impoverished backgrounds stand to lose the most. For those who are supposed to benefit from racial preferences, they will be subjugated to the toxic stigma and underperformance and mismatch. Do we want that for our students? Most importantly, Prop 16 is morally wrong in principle, as its politically correct proponents ruthlessly attack the American creed of equal opportunity and merit. Prop 16 is about reestablishing backwards governmental purposes based on race and sex, thereby legalizing discrimination. It was put on this year's ballot through legislative fast track via political climate of race, tensions, and groupthink. Prop 16 is funded by certain elites with such as a single billionaire donor who contributed $5.5 million. These billionaires and special interest groups feel entitled to impose racial preferences on Californians and clamor to curry favor with regulators and politicians in Sacramento. In sharp contrast, the no on Prop 16 has amassed nearly 6,000 donors in less than 3 months, demonstrating a historic groundswell of grassroots support from voters across the state. No on 16 is a broad-based grassroots movement by the people and for the people. The coalition has a bipartisan support from prominent Republicans, long-term Democrats, and a prominent independents. We are bringing people together on this one. So let me summarize with the following 5 points on no on 16. 1, Prop 16 is not affirmative action. Need-based affirmative action has never been banned in California. Prop 16 is a political, what I would call a cover-up or a band-aid over policy failures to improve K-12 education in underprivileged communities. Prop 16 is backed by billionaire contributions, special interest groups, and certain types of elites. Prop 16 is the epitome of racism and illiberal attacks on the democratic principle of equality and liberty. It ruthlessly targets Asian Americans of descent and penalizes hard work, initiative, and excellence. Prop 16 is not about diversity because diversity has never been absent in California. We're a beautiful state. And number 5, Prop 16 will hurt as intended benefit. It will hurt its intended beneficiaries. It will drag everyone down by lowering standards and perpetuating academic mismatch and negative stigmas against the underserved. I want to end my presentation today with my personal perspective. Why is this personal? For me, I'm a first-generation native Californian with my roots in Mexico. My parents were immigrants. I come from a modest working-class family, and I too have encountered tremendous socioeconomic challenges in my pursuit of the American dream. But I have prevailed.
Board Member Ochoa?
Yes.
I'm going to give you just 1 more minute to wrap up. We've already gone over time quite a bit.
Certainly, absolutely. But I have prevailed with resolve and an unshakable faith in what's eternally true to the American experiment of true equality. I'm a successful entrepreneur in the real estate industry, a proud mom of 3 amazing children, including, well, I won't talk about them later.
Okay. With the screen freezing, I'm going to take that moment to transition to the panel. Thank you for your presentation, Rosalie, or board member. Right now, we're going to go to the panel, as mentioned, and before we actually jump into the panel, I do want to share a couple group norms. And for all of them, this is a friendly reminder. I don't think we really need to spend too much time here, but we are going to ask that everyone, all the panelists, in your responses, please be respectful of different opinions and positions. Don't interrupt your other panelists, and please stay on time. So in regards to time, we will have 3 minutes per speaker or per panelist that selects to respond to each question. Next slide. right. So those are our panelists. Our three panelists include Senator Bradford, representing the yes on Proposition 16 again, as well as Rosalisi Ochoa, board member for Yucaipa Cali Mesa School District, representing the no on Prop 16 position. And I do want to point out, apologize, we don't have her photo up. There was a last minute change, so but we are so grateful to have you participate. We also have Carlos Morgner of Morgner Construction Management joining us as a minority business enterprise. And lastly, Kelly Irving with the Long Beach Transit Authority joining us today in her role as Regulatory Compliance and Civil Rights Officer. Next slide. All right, so the first question, currently there are federal requirements, reporting requirements related to affirmative action in employment and contracting. If Proposition 16 is passed, what, if any, reporting requirements on affirmative action activities can public entities expect for subcontracting, hiring, as well as college acceptance? And this question is for Senator Bradford and Rosalisi, board member Ochoa. Who would like to go first?
Proposition 16 has no reporting requirements. It has checks and balances, but it has no reporting requirements. And I just want to counter some of the things that Ms. Ochoa stated as it related to the area of transportation. We passed historic transportation bill SB 1 in 2017. There is specific language in SB 1 that speaks to women and minority-owned businesses, because Governor Brown truly agreed again that minorities were not getting any of this Caltrans work. We now have an inspector general whose sole role is to make sure that women and minority contractors, businesses have opportunity at this work. We wouldn't need all these checks and balances already on the state level if this was a colorblind fair system. So Prop 16 does not require it's the so-called reporting requirements, but it will have oversight again to make sure that diversity is reflected, which clearly doesn't exist in anything that we're doing here in California and across this country. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Board member Ochoa Bogue, would you like to respond to the question as well? You're muted.
Okay. Can you hear me okay now?
Yes.
Perfect. Right now we have three kinds of affirmative action programs that are currently legal in California, for which no new reporting requirements should be expected. We have social, economic-based affirmative action programs, bona fide sex-conscious measures, and race-conscious measures and state programs that take federal money. Do you want me to go into some examples, or should I get at that?
You have 3 minutes to respond and two remaining.
Okay, give you some programs right now that we have. The University of California Guidelines for Addressing Race and Gender Equity in Academic Programs in compliance with Prop 209. It's July 2015. Federal affirmative action regulations and university policy requires that all campus develop and maintain written affirmative action programs covering staff, faculty, and all other academic employees. We have the general university policy regarding academic appointment affirmative actions and non-discrimination in employment, July 2012. It is the policy of the university, I quote, University of California to undertake affirmative action consistent with its obligation as a federal contractor for minorities and women, for persons with disabilities, and for covered veterans. The UCLA campus Human Resources Procedure 14 Affirmative Action Plan AAP, a written document by which the university is committed to eliminate and remedy past discriminations against protected classes and underutilization of women and minorities. As a federal contractor with contracts in excess of $50,000 50 or more employees, the University of California is required by executive order 11,246 to develop and maintain a written AAP and programs to correct the underutilization of women and minorities in its workforce. And lastly, the City of Los Angeles Department of Public Works Bureau of Contract Administration affirmative action. While Proposition 209 imposes considerable limits on affirmative action in public contracting, it leaves considerable leeway for outreach efforts and almost certainly permits state and local agencies to engage in more aggressive data collection efforts in order to better ensure public contracts that are allocated in fair, efficient, and non-discriminatory manner. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm glad you brought up the federal affirmative action programs. We'll come back to that question a little bit later and how that balances between state and federal programs. The next question is, Prop 16 drafters contend that its passage will impact public education, hiring, and contracting. Since they say that education is, since we say as a society, education is the great equalizer, we will begin with our first question targeted to education. While Prop 209 was passed in 1996, in large part, institutions of higher education began applying the new constitutional amendment while reviewing college applications received in fall of 1997, which would in turn impact the incoming class of 1998. What, if any, has been the demographic shift in public higher education, attendance rates and retention rates from 1998 to today? And again, this question is posed for Senator Bradford, if you'd like to respond, or Board Member Ochoa Bo.
Mr. Choi can go first.
Okay. Thank you, Senator. So as I mentioned in my opening statement, diversity has improved in California's public universities over the last 2 decades. UC, 9 campuses, 6 Hispanic serving institutions, 4 awarded higher education excellence and diversity, strategic partnerships with historically Black, extensive outreach to underserved students through the Early Academic Outreach Program, the MESA program, and Puente Project. CSU, 23 campuses, 40% Hispanic, 21 meet the HSI criteria. Minority graduations at UC, 4-year graduation rates of underrepresented racial minorities rose from 31.3% during the 1995 to 97 period to 36.6% during 1998 to 2000, then to 43.3% during the 2001 to 2003 period. In 2014, URM's 4-year graduation rates rose to a record high of 55.1%. The 6-year graduation rate has fared even better, with a 65.5% in 1998 and 75.1% in 2013. In July of 2020, the UC system announced a historic first for admitting Latino students as the largest freshman group, while UC Berkeley this year admitted record high numbers of Black, 737, and Latinos, 3,379 freshmen. So minority admissions at UC exceeded those of 1996, both in absolute numbers and as a percentage of all admits, 18.69% in 1996 to 36.53% in 2019. Thank you.
I would be interested in seeing that data that Ms. Ochoa has, because I've spent the last 10 years as a member of the California legislature. And one thing we know for sure, Dr. Shirley Weber, who was my college professor at San Diego State and who was the primary author of ACA 5, one thing she knows and have shared with all the ethnic caucuses is that enrollment amongst minority students as an all-time low. So if you see this great spike in the last year, it's because if you go from 0 to 1, that's 100% increase in enrollment. And so it's not hard to spike your numbers when your enrollment was so low to start with. So, and I was the author last year of SB 206. I don't know if you guys know that. That's called the Fair Pay to Play Act for college students, where we saw the greatest enrollment, and we heard it from women and minority students. The only people of color that are on any of these major universities are athletes. They're student athletes. They're not everyday students. I mean, we've even had Michelle Obama, who stated that when she got to Yale, which is, Princeton, that she felt on an island because there was so few minorities and people that looked like her on college campuses. I have visited college campuses. Enrollment has not increased. Graduation has not increased. It has gone down. And for our Asian brothers and sisters, as I stated in my opening, their numbers surely haven't increased. They've decreased. And where they show growth, again, is at the University of Texas, University of Michigan, Yale, Harvard, those institutions that use race as a qualifying consideration for admissions. That's where their numbers have grown, not here in California. John Perez, former speaker, good colleague of mine, who's a UC regent, he will always also argue that numbers for African-American and Latinos are at all-time low in most of these UC campuses.
Yeah, this is Carlos Morgner. I'd like to interject a little bit here. I'm also a CPA, and I deal with numbers and statistics all the time. I think what we're looking at here is not the quantity, but the quality of the education. If they go into African studies, Latino studies, sociology, I think we have to look encouraging the licensed trades, not just the master's degrees and stuff like that. The licensed trades will allow our people to actually charge for their services and not just have to sell their backgrounds and history. So I think we have to look at not statistics per se, and I respect what you're saying, Mrs. Shaw, but I think we have to look at the quality of the type of education they're getting so that we have more CPAs, more lawyers, more doctors, and those kind of trades. So I think numbers are okay, but they don't tell the complete story.
Thank you, Mr. Morgner. Our next question is, California is the most populous state in the country at just under 40 million people, the most racially diverse, and possibly by religion and other metrics of diversity as well, and the 5th largest economy in the world. With this standing, the decisions made here in California has the potential to have ripple effects, not just within the state, but across the country, as well as globally. How would the repeal of Prop 209 impact our system of public education that ultimately feeds into our workforce and our economy? And this question is open to all panelists.
Be shy. All right, well, I'll start. I think it's often said, so goes California, so goes the nation. I think it would set a great precedent where we need to go as a nation. We've seen what happened in the last 4 years. We have a racist and a bigot in the White House that has spurred racial division that has been festered under a rock for the last 200 years, and it has all come out in full display over the last 4 years. And I think Proposition 16 is timely. Ms. Ochoa stated it was based on the climate of the day. No, HCA 5 was introduced last year, well before the pandemic, well before the George Floyd, the Breonna Taylors, the Andres Gardanos, all the full senseless killings with law enforcement, the Ahmaud Arbery. No, this was introduced last year, again, based on the data and information that we had in the legislature. Again, I think it moves the needle not only for California, but for this nation to be far more inclusive. Because again, if we don't want to look at the history of this country, and accept the fact that the history of this country was founded on racism, and to say that those barriers have been removed in the last 200 years, you're lying to yourselves. So I think it's a good framework for the rest of the nation to follow if we're able to pass Proposition 16.
Thank you, Senator Bradford.
Yes, Carlos Morgner. I think we have to look at spreading the wealth, That's the concept I'm proposing here. All ships will rise when the money is spread out to all people, the jobs, the education, and the economy should gain by allowing more free flow of monies, by having more jobs and having more talent through the minority communities. They'll be able to buy more goods, buy the cars, be able to pass some of that down to their children and generations. So all ships will rise by spreading the wealth. And I always believe that's one of the opportunities of these type of programs, to allow the economic benefits to be sustained by all people.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Morgner. Any other panelists would like to respond to this question?
I'd just like to make a couple of remarks just on Senator's question in regards to the data. Those come from the UC and the CSU's official admissions database, just for your reference on that. You had asked earlier about that, but we'd be more than happy to send you the links for that. Number two, if Prop 16 passes, the already mammoth California budget deficit will increase exponentially to overpay for public contracts, fund disparity studies, provide diversity and equity officers, and revamp new admissions programs. But, you know, let me just quickly say that as a daughter of immigrant parents, I completely agree with Mr. Is it Munger? Morgner. I completely agree.
Call me Carlos.
Carlos, okay. Un placer, señor Carlos.
Okay.
But I do want to state that as a daughter of immigrant parents who truly believes in education opportunities, I completely agree with you that we do need to have opportunity and wealth spread out to it. But we have to look at why we are not having those opportunities. And from a teacher's perspective, from a mother's perspective, from someone who traveled quite a bit in California, attending different schools, I can tell you right now that we truly have to focus at the root of the problems. And I think a lot of it has to do with our education, the quality of education that we're providing, and encouraging to making sure that people and parents have choice in their educational opportunities, to make sure that those needs are met. Because as immigrants, and especially as a Latino community, people want to be successful. They want their children to be successful. They want to have great education. They want to be entrepreneurs. That innately is the immigrant spirit. And so why is that not happening? I honestly want to look into our educational system and making sure that K-12 education is providing preparation for these students to be successful and to have more opportunities. And you're right. I love the fact that you said not just certain types of careers that you have to sell your services, but one that you can actually charge for. So just a little thought on that one, just a personal thought.
Well, very good. I appreciate that. Well, times are changing. You know, I kind of believe in the Darwin philosophy or concept that it's not the strongest nor the fastest, but those that adapt to their circumstances. That's the evolutionary process. And I think Ruth Bader Ginsburg exemplified that by going with the women's rights and the things that she proposed, as when she said the Constitution, it doesn't mention women, and it also doesn't mention the word freedom, but it does mention that times are changing, and that's why these type of laws are being proposed by our people and by people in responsible positions, because they see the system can be improved. And that's what I see Proposition 16 representing. We're trying to improve a system to make it fair and equal for everybody. If not, why do we have these riots? Why do we have sicknesses? Why do we have all these issues, this division in our system right now? People aren't comfortable with what the laws are. So let's use the evolutionary process of Charles Darwin and let's adapt to the change. We as Hispanics, I'm an immigrant, I'm originally from Ecuador, and I'm a beneficiary of these programs, and I appreciate them, but it's necessarily not an award, it's a responsibility. And that responsibility means that we have to do better. Thank you.
Can I just respond to that really quick?
Sure. Well, this will be the last response for this question, but go ahead.
Okay, no, go ahead. Well, I'll let someone else speak. That's fine. I'm sure I can bring in my other thoughts through another question.
All right, we have a couple more questions. Thank you, Board Member Choabo, for holding back a bit. The California Official Voter Information Guide states that the potential fiscal effects of implementing programs is highly uncertain. Understanding that if Prop 16 is repealed, if Prop 209 is repealed, each state and local entity could make a number of decisions about policies and programs that could incur costs. What are the anticipated short and long-term statewide or local impact gains or losses for the economy by repealing Prop 209?
I don't think there will be any long-term gains. Again, over the last 24 years, minority contractors, women-owned contractors have lost on average of $1 billion annually in contract opportunities because of the passage of 209. Will it require cities to have a more critical eye when vetting and letting out contracts? Yes, but I don't see any additional cost to government. And I just think that's a scare tactic to say, oh, it's going to overburden us. Let me tell you what's overburdened us, this pandemic. Prior to this pandemic, we had $54 billion in California reserves. We've eaten through half of that already in just 6 months. So this continued pandemic, again, that is impacting minorities harder than any other group in this nation, be it through healthcare, through education. That's the impact that we should be worrying about. And those are what we should be willing to address. I think cities and the state government can easily address what's going to be involved in looking at an applicant, be it for a job, a contracting opportunity, without any additional burden or cost to any of those governmental entities.
Thank you, Senator Bradford.
This is Kelly Irving. I'd like to add, from an agency's perspective, anticipated long-term gains will be made with repealing Prop 209 from an employment, a contracting perspective. I also will add that potentially due to the education, the access of quality education and non-traditional industries, we will see gains and be able to have a strong workforce to be able to come into public agencies. So repealing Prop 209, I see it as a economic gain. You're employing people, you're allowing individuals access to education, educational opportunities that were not traditionally available or recruited during the phase of Prop 209. Prop 16, I do believe, will have a very positive economic impact, short and long term.
Thank you, Kelly. Would any of the other panelists like to respond? Sounds like a maybe.
I'm trying to like, do we keep going? So let me just state this. In contracting, according to a peer-reviewed study by UC Santa Cruz economist, the California Department of Transportation saved approximately $64 million between 1998 and 1999 in extra costs associated with preferential contracting. That's about $1 billion, or did I read this one? I'm sorry if I talked about this one yet. After Prop 209, the prices on state-funded contracts fell by 5.6 relative to federal-funded projects, for which preferences still applied. So anyway, that's a lot of money that we can say. I'm not sure. Anyway, that's just some thoughts.
Thank you, Board Member Ochoa-Bulb. I would like to add this from an agency's perspective. The numbers that you're speaking of are really tied to federal funding, where there are race and gender conscious or neutral measures based on the dollars we receive from a federal agency. What we're talking about today is really state funded projects, state and local funded projects, where we as agencies cannot collect that data. We have to then go into a race neutral environment where we look at small business. And we know that small business could very well be owned and operated by minorities or women-owned firms, but we're not calculating those dollars from their perspective, meaning their characteristic perspective. So when you talk about these numbers, you're actually bringing the stats related to federally funded projects. And that there is not this conversation. I mean, because we're going to actually have greater impact when it comes to state and local dollar funded projects where we're able to fill our workforce with the whatever is missing, meaning the groups that are missing, whether it's women. You talked about the affirmative action plan. The state of California does not ask for an AAP, but the federal government does. It asks for all agencies receiving federal funding to report out every odd year your EEO4. And then based on that, we're having to talk to or address the issues where we have deficiencies. And so therefore, individuals such as myself, I'm that inclusionista, we have to actually come up with real creative measures to try to recruit and retain individuals that are underrepresented on a federal level. What we're talking about today is really the state funded projects. So as I look at my federal funded projects, those are my initiatives for federal funded projects. When I look at our state and local funded projects, I cannot look at, I may know the numbers, but I cannot make a concerted effort to actually engage those deficiencies without being in violation of the law. And so we're talking about systemic discrimination that's intrinsic in what we are doing as an agency or public agency. We are, and I speak from a public agency's perspective, but as we contract with our prime contractors, if it's federally funded, we push that requirement down into the requirements of our contract to our prime contractors. If it's state or local, we cannot request for any monitoring or conscious measures to actually engage women or people of color in those particular numbers, whether or not it's our labor force and or our contracting. So I do believe if, in fact, Prop 209 is repealed, it will allow practitioners such as myself to be able to come up and flow creative measures to be race and gender conscious relative to our state and local funded projects.
Yes.
Thank you, Kelly.
Carlos Morgner, can I add a little bit?
Sure.
We're talking about America, United States of America, the largest economy in the world. If we're looking at a percentage like that, a minuscule percentage to the net worth of what the United States is,
yes,
it's really inconsequential. We have to look at the future. This is improving the future to give these agencies flexibility for the jobs of the future, the electrification of America, the infrastructures of America that's going on. We need to prepare this workforce, and this is going to give them the tools in order to build the next economy of workers. And we need to participate in a meaningful way. I'm doing major work in car charging in the areas where we're going to be training a lot of the mechanics, a lot of the people that are going to know electrification and the infrastructure. So these are basic jobs for the minorities, where they'll be working with their hands, their heads, and with their hearts.
Thank you, Mr. Morgner, and Kelly as well. And I think this is a really good transition to our last and final question. And it's really around that balance between federally and state funded projects. As we know, Prop 209 repealed affirmative action from California, or removed it from California, made it constitutionally illegal, as Kelly mentioned. However, federally, there still is affirmative action, both in other states as well as in the federal government. So how will Prop 16 impact public entities receiving both federal funds that have race and gender conscious measures if Prop 16 is not passed, which will require state and locals to maintain a neutral stance? How do the two balance?
I like to start off if I may. Okay, so as an agency that receives federal funding from a DBE perspective, a disadvantaged business enterprise program perspective, any agency that receives a grant in excess of $250,000 is required to have a DBE program. That DBE program, much like Long Beach Transit or the City of LA or Caltrans, we are required to, if you're an agency you're small, you will follow suit of what the nearest agency, large agency, such as a Metro. For Long Beach Transit, it would be Metro. Every 3 to 5 years, those agencies have to conduct what is called a disparity study. And I think board member Ochoa Bo spoke to a disparity study. That disparity study is actually looking at the utilization of minorities and women on the contractors and evaluating the barriers that are presented by the contracting agency, meaning the owner, Long Beach Transit or Metro or Caltrans, and or their prime contractors. So what we're seeing, we're not seeing that firms that are owned by women and or minorities are ranking in the same dollar categories as the prime contractors. That in itself, when we look at those prime contracts, and then we look at the utilization of women and minority-owned firms, that's when you'll see a race-conscious measure that results from this disparity study that's conducted every 3 to 5 years. Many of these agencies are having to put in place a race-conscious goal in order to try to level the playing field for these small firms to participate. If we did not have that, those firms more than likely would not be able to grow large enough to become a competing prime. So let's now break it down to the state level. On the state level, we're not allowed to set goals based on a disadvantaged business enterprise category. So you're left to only engage that firm from a small business perspective. And in that, you may know that the firm is minority or woman owned, but you're only looking at the overall consensus of whether or not they're just small. And when you're looking at that, that means there are other people entering into that, market that may not be minority or woman owned. So when you look at the overall accessibility to contracts, the availability pool of workforce, and also the education of these particular individuals, whether or not it's trade and or 2 or 4 year universities, we are concerned from a public agencies because we want the very best product for the very best price, because we are the overseers, or we have the responsibility of watching over the citizens' money. So our goal is to be fair, and our goal is also to level the playing field so that these firms can participate. So right now we're in Prop 209. We're not allowed to monitor the minority and women participation on state and local funded projects. And so if we are funded by Caltrans, we have to keep in mind that we're prohibited from putting a concerted effort out to minority or women-owned firms. So on our federal funded projects, we are allowed to actually put in conscious measures to engage in outreach and bring those firms in. Many times you'll see, as a result of Prop 209, you saw in the recent past, you see a lot of public agencies putting in a small business set aside, because they're actually trying to be creative to allow for small firms that more than likely are minority or women owned, because there are thresholds that they cannot exceed in order to participate on those contracts. But when you look at that population, the number of minorities and women in the SBE program winning contracts is not great. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that perspective, Kelly. We have about 3 minutes left in the hour. So I want to give a chance for a 1 minute wrap up for each panelist. And I'm just going to start from where I see the pictures going from left to right. So I'll start with Mr. Morgner. You have 1 minute to close out.
Well, listening to Kelly, I interpreted that it's going to give her and the agencies flexibility to improve the system. So I see Proposition 16 enhancing that opportunity to give flexibility to the agencies, to the contractors, in order to expand the pool of services and the people that would have those opportunities. I can only speak from my personal experiences and the benefits that we receive now that my daughter's minorities, women-owned business taking over a lot of the issues. So to have that flexibility in hands of respectable people like Kelly would enhance the whole system of opportunities for all of us. So what Proposition 16 does, it improves the 209 by making flexibility in these areas of opportunities for these type of agencies, and also with the contractors. And as we all know, we need to spread the money and the financial capabilities for these small businesses and capital. And a lot of them can't get bonded. A lot of them can't buy the equipment. A lot of them won't be able to compete at this stage. So by giving these agencies a little bit of flexibility in the bonding, in the financial, and even with the banks, I think we can all benefit. And the statistics, as Mrs. Ochoa said, will become meaningful and not just numbers. They'll become real people doing real work.
Thank you, Ms. Gardner. Board Member Ochoa Bogue, you have 1 minute closeout. You're currently muted.
I recognize and relate to the historical and contemporary struggles of Latino Americans, but I also recognize that our personal struggles are not confined to a racial or ethnic box. The human experience is multifaceted and unique and an individual basis. Prop 16 reduces our human struggles to a one-dimensional veneer of perceived systemic racism, when its proponents are in fact advocating for racism, that is treating individuals and groups differently based on race. Two wrongs won't make it right. The majority of Californian voters are also on our side, as indicated by a recent poll from the Public Policy Institute of California. Defeating Prop 16 would not only represent a repudiation of a special interest in the most populous state, itself a national story, but signal nationally the days are numbered for groupthink, identity politics, and racial spoils. And then I'd also like to state that from a mother's perspective, I worry about showing preferential treatment, in our homes with our children and what type of environment that creates in our home. And I would hate to have that come back to California as a state with Prop 16 in the environment that will create with people. So just as I would not create a system in my home to prefer one child over another because of X, Y, and Z, or 1, 2, and 3, I worry that California would be doing that with Prop 16.
Thank you, Board Member Ochoa Bogue. Ms. Irving, you have 1 minute to close out.
Okay, I can't say anything.
I was gonna say, I'm gonna be tough on you.
Okay, I will say this. From the perspective of being inclusive, from an agency perspective, it's very important that we look at the both sides and really look at what the true numbers are reflective across all groups, meaning women and each category of minorities. With that being said, as an agency that values the contributions of a very diverse workforce, we want to make sure that we are working hard to support law that encourages heterogeneous organization. Homogeneous organizations are very limited to just one perspective, one line of business. What we want to do is create an opportunity for people that have diverse walks of life, diverse backgrounds and experiences and characteristics to be able to convene here in our agency to bring the very best service that we can provide. With that being said, Prop 16, I believe, will allow for practitioners such as myself to have a greater ability to actually recruit the very best. We're not looking for preferential, we're not supporting preferential, we're actually giving everybody an equal not equality, but an equity opportunity to participate. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly, and you made it in the 1 minute. Senator Bradford, could you close us out today with your closing remarks?
I should just say ditto to what Ms. Irving and Mr. Morgner stated. I think they hit the nail on the head, and you see why I worked for Kelly Irving over those years. But I want to thank all the participants here today. But Proposition 16 is a common sense measure. For any of us to believe that California, let alone the United States, is not a race-based country, and everything that is done of any significance if race and gender is not being considered, and you're living under a rock. This does not create quotas. It doesn't create preferential treatment. It just creates, as Irving says, equity lands to make sure everyone has a seat at the table. I can, again, list hundreds of pieces of legislation that we've passed in the California legislature over the last 24 years that has nibbled around the edges of trying to get to this equity issue of fairness. And they constantly have to qualify businesses as disadvantaged. That in of itself is a stigma, because a lot of major corporations and prime contractors say, oh, disadvantage, that means you're lacking in some way. No, that's how we have to frame some of these businesses. They're not disadvantaged in skill set. Where their disadvantages is in opportunities. So Prop 16 will give us opportunity at contracting opportunities, at employment opportunities, at educational opportunities, healthcare opportunities. All this does is level the playing field. And again, I don't want to make this too political, but I think we've seen in the last 4 years where this country is going, and it's not in a unifying direction. It's more in a divisive racial hatred direction. And Proposition 16 helped address some of those disparities by making sure everybody has a seat at the table. California and the United States is truly the land of opportunity, but there are many barriers in front of people of color to get to those opportunities. This helps remove some of those barriers.
Thank you, Senator. And thank you to all of our panelists for joining today. I would like to share to those that are listening that you can re-listen if you missed something, because it will be posted on, I believe, on Facebook as well as LinkedIn. This was a recorded session, and you can also share it so that you can provide this education to other folks in your network. It's important that we're all educated when we get to the ballot box, or maybe this year the mailbox, to drop in our ballots. So thank you all, and I look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you all for caring and
Thank you.
voting.
Thank you for allowing us to come and share our thoughts.
Yes.
Thank you so much. You were excellent. Love you.
Thank you.
Despídete,
Has the recording stopped, Sandy?
Yes.